Welcome to the second day of Out Summit, an annual global convening for the human rights of LGBTIQ people, organized by Outright Action International and CUNY School of Law. My name is Masha Gessen. My pronouns are they or she. I'm the acting executive director at Outright. If you are joining us for the first time, let me tell you briefly about Outright. We're one of the oldest global organizations working for the human rights of LGBTIQ people everywhere through advocacy at the international, regional, and national levels. We issue groundbreaking research, design and deliver tailored programming on key issues such as legal gender recognition, fighting gender-based violence, tackling sexual orientation and gender identity change efforts, sometimes referred to as conversion therapy, and many other issues, and always in collaboration with partners around the world. Out Summit is an annual event where we come together from across civil society, state and private sector boundaries to strategize, share insights, and collaborate for further progress. Today, we have an exciting program planned. Look at the sessions to see that you find on the left-hand side of your screen to see what we have. We have sessions about moral panic, trans rights globally, and the session with some funders who are relatively new to funding LGBTIQ issues, and much, much more. Before we kick off the program, I want to share a few housekeeping items with you. This has to be a safe space, so please make sure you read the code of conduct, which is available in the lobby. We have a one warning policy, so if someone breaks the code of conduct, we'll give one warning through the private chat function in Feedloop. And if it's not heeded and the behavior continues, we will remove the participant and will not allow them to return. If you experience any technical difficulties, number one, please join Out Summit from Google Chrome. We have found that that is the best platform to use. So if something doesn't seem right, see if you can switch the browser. Second, we have an Out Summit tech booth that is available all day that you can find on the sessions tab. And we have an Outright team member in the booth all day to help you troubleshoot and answer any questions. You can also send an email to outsummit@outrightinternational.org and pose a question there, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Most sessions are recorded, but we're only recording the speakers. So unless you're a speaker, you won't be shown on the recording. All sessions have live captioning in English. Some sessions have translation in Spanish, Arabic, and Bahasa. And you can see which ones in the session information in the sessions tab. And you can also change the text on the Feedloop platform for another language using select language in the upper right-hand corner. And right next to it, you have the accessibility adjustment. It's a small circular black and white button if you want to change any settings to make your experience more accessible. You can engage directly with speakers by finding their profile in the speakers tab and sending them a message, especially if you want to ask a question after a session. You can use that function. And you can also interact with other people who are participating in Out Summit through the chat window in the lobby or the networking menu. If you have any trouble accessing captions or interpretation during the sessions, please use the More button indicated by 3 dots in your Feedloop video window. Those were all the housekeeping issues that I had for today. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Masha Gessen. Masha is a staff writer at The New Yorker and author of 12 books of nonfiction. They became a journalist in the 80s, working in the LGBTIQ press in the US, have lived since then in Russia, and is now based in New York City. Masha also played a critical role in the founding of Outright in the 1990s together with Julie Dorf. Over to you, Masha.
Thank you, Maria. It's it's not a COVID era panel if you don't forget to unmute yourself when you start speaking. It's really great to be here and to have this opportunity to speak. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about myself. I came to the United States as a teenager from Russia. I was 14 years old. In 1981, I already knew I was queer. And very soon after I arrived in the States, I also knew that that was a problem, not a problem with being queer in the United States. Compared to the Soviet Union, it actually seemed like a land of opportunity, but a problem because at the time, it was actually illegal for LGBTQ people to enter the United States on any kind of visa and to seek legal status as an immigrant because we were considered psychopathic personalities. So in the late 19, I delayed applying for my citizenship, for which I technically qualified within 5 years of arriving as a political refugee. And so I trailed behind my family. And finally, in 1989, I decided to sue the Immigration and Naturalization Service. And the claim never went to court, but I did get my citizenship. And a couple of years later, I met two gay activists from Moscow. We weren't using the term LGBTQ. We were just saying gay and lesbian. So I met two gay activists from Moscow, which seemed unthinkable to me at the time, but there they were in the flesh. They came to visit New York. And so through them, I met Julie Dorf. And in 1991, almost exactly 10 years after leaving the Soviet Union, I was back in the Soviet Union helping organize the first gay and lesbian conference and film festival in Moscow and St. Petersburg, then just in the process of changing its name from Leningrad to St. Petersburg. It was the most incredible feeling to be able to go back, to be able to do the kind of activism that I had been doing in the United States, and to feel like I had a connection with these people that I was meeting, both because we were from the same place, but also because we had similar experiences in the world where we were part of the same people. And we also had the same kind of sense that the world was just moving forward at incredible speed. Fast forward 22 years. And I had been living in Russia for more than 20 years. I had a family there. I had been out and very publicly out for many, many years, basically since first coming back and landing on the front page of a major newspaper. And I was working as a journalist and a magazine editor. And the Kremlin launches its anti-gay campaign and threatens my family in particular with having my kids taken away. And so we had to emigrate again and come to the United States again. And, you know, as immigrations go, this was an easy one. I had citizenship. I had the money to buy a place in New York. And so it was incredibly traumatic for my kids, but to just be able to just have to leave home. But very soon after arriving in the US, I went to this gala dinner hosted by Immigration Equality. And everything about it was like time travel. It was mind-boggling. I mean, first of all, that there could be an organization like Immigration Equality that worked on behalf of LGBTQ immigrants to the United States openly. And also that it had to change its work recently because of same-sex marriage. And so, you know, instead of the whole issue of working with binational couples in the United States and trying painstakingly to legalize them fell by the wayside. So they were in this heady space. And I remember one of the founders of Immigration Equality speaking on stage at that time and saying, this is what winning feels like. And I thought, oh, wow, this is what winning feels like. It was again that sense of the world just going forward at incredible speed. And both of those moments of feeling like the world is going forward are rooted in this assumption that we often have. And, even if we talk a lot about this assumption being wrong, we still have it, right? We have this assumption that progress is linear, that there's a kind of future that we're moving toward, and we may be moving toward it at frustratingly slow speeds at times, and sometimes at mind-bogglingly fast speeds. But it's a forward movement. We know that progress is not linear. We've all heard this phrase, but I want to think about what it feels like, right? What it feels like to feel when things are reversed, when you lose the things you have won. And I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I've been thinking about it listening to the Supreme Court hearings on the abortion case, which if the Supreme Court rules, decides to reverse abortion rights for women in the United States, we know that the right to same-sex marriage is next. I've been thinking about it as I covered earlier this year, the Tavistock case in Great Britain, the case that basically discontinued access to trans healthcare for British teenagers. In Russia, I've thought about it a lot, right? And think about what it feels like, and a lot of you don't have to go very far to think about it because you're in this exact position. What does it feel like to be a person who either is married, and I'm not, I don't think that the right to marriage is some kind of holy grail, but at the same time, and after many, many years of not thinking that the right to marriage was a holy grail, or even thinking that it was a huge priority for the movement, thinking that other things were more important, I also remember the feeling, right, that I had when the Obergefell decision came down in the United States in 2015, legalizing making same-sex marriage the law of the land all over the country, and thinking, oh my God, I lived to see this. I lived to see, I covered as a gay journalist the Supreme Court decision in the Texas sodomy case, when the Supreme Court basically ruled that the police were right, the state was right in coming into a gay man's bedroom and prosecuting him for engaging in sodomy. And here I was in my lifetime, seeing this incredible decision, seeing my life, or some part of my life, recognized in a way that I had never imagined, right? Another moment of this feeling of headiness. And so now, just a very short time later, 6 years later, we're finding ourselves in a position of thinking, what's going to happen to married couples when the right to marriage is reversed? What's going to happen? And this actually is something that occupies my imagination much more. What happens to young people who came of age, LGBTQI young people who came of age with the assumption that these rights existed? What happens when those rights are reversed? What happens to trans people who, like me, who are depending on access to medical interventions, when you just might lose them at any moment, or when you do lose them? I'm talking about not just Great Britain, I'm talking about a huge swath of the world where access to trans healthcare has become more and more difficult in the last few years, and access to change of legal status has also become either more difficult or has basically disappeared. what happens to your life when what you have built it around is yanked away from you? I've also been looking at Russia, the place where, you know, that incredible festival and conference that we held 30 years ago seemed to portend all the things we wanted, right? That incredible sense of linear progress. And now in Russia, it has not just being openly LGBTQ, but speaking out for LGBT rights has become the fastest way to be declared what's called a foreign agent, right? A foreign agent is a way of designating somebody other while living in the country. An increasing number of organizations and individuals have been giving this designation, which basically means they're quite literally, in a very postmodern, weird way, dehumanized, because if you're an individual who's been declared a foreign agent, you have to immediately go register yourself as a legal entity. And everything you say from that point on, whether you are posting pictures of cats on Instagram or going on Tinder, actually, or publishing an article, has to be prefaced with a bizarre 22-word announcement that you have been designated a foreign agent. Igor Kochetkov, an outstanding activist who's the executive director of the LGBT network in Russia, has been declared a foreign agent. A number of organizations that are LGBTQ organizations or organizations that have in any way advocated for LGBT rights have been declared foreign agents. And in fact, the Ministry of Justice has specified that they're being declared foreign agents because they spoke up for LGBT rights. So here we have a country that is, that after a nearly 10-year anti-gay campaign has gotten to the point where it basically says anybody who is in any way either openly LGBT or even openly says that they're willing to recognize the humanity of LGBTQI people does not belong in this country. This is happening, of course, all over the region. In Poland, which hosted Europride a few years back, now you have more than 100 LGBT-free zones. Think about what it feels like to have gone to World Pride or to have been openly LGBTQ, and then to walk down a street that actually has signs saying that this is an LGBT-free zone. I've had that experience, and it is, I hesitate to describe it, but it hits you much harder than you expect it to hit you. And so this is, this is what we have been looking at for the last, say, decade. And I think it's, and I've described some of the milder cases, right? I'm not talking about countries where it is illegal and punishable by the death penalty to be in a same-sex relationship. But the reason I'm talking about this sense of reversal, the sense of losing something, is because I think this is a feeling that in some ways is easier for people to imagine, and in some ways more horrifying to imagine, right? It's that sense of having no place to hide, of having nothing to depend on, of having the ground yanked out from under your feet. And it's a feeling that defies understanding in a way that even being born in a country where your life is impossible doesn't quite compare to. And then we have the blow of the last couple of years, which I think we're still going to be spending a lot of time understanding the transformations that COVID has either forced onto our world or facilitated in our world. Obviously, one of those transformations is this experience of isolation and loneliness that so many people have been subjected to, which for LGBTQI people is often fraught in ways that I think we don't talk about enough and perhaps don't think about enough, right? When access to the life-sustaining and life-saving ties of community are lost. But on a worldwide level, what we have seen is an unprecedented in our lifetimes reinforcement of borders and the idea of borders. 2 years ago, we lived in a profoundly interconnected world. It was much more experientially, it was more interconnected for people who have passports that allow them to travel all over the world and have the means to travel the world. But it was functionally interconnected for almost everybody, right? You could, at great risk to yourself, try to flee a country. You could do it at lesser risk. You could come to the United States on a tourist visa and apply for asylum or not apply for asylum as an LGBTQ person. You could go to any number of European countries that we didn't have nearly enough countries recognizing the right to asylum on the basis of anti-LGBTQ persecution. But it was possible to seek legal status in a number of countries, and it was possible to move around the world and to seek safe space, even if it didn't necessarily involve legal status. That's something I think that none of us imagined could just stop. And functionally, that's what's happened, right? Closed borders, lockdowns, borders that have reappeared, for example, between European countries. These are things that are inconvenient for business travelers or conference travelers like me, but they are a disappeared lifeline for people who, when they were in danger, or when they saw their rights being yanked out from under them, at least knew that there was someplace else you could go. There was someplace else that was different. And even if that place was having problems of its own, it was safer than the place where you are. And the incredible damage to both the sort of the movement, the possibility of movement, and the legal possibility of movement, and the sense that movement was possible, that escape was possible, that COVID has done, I think is something that we still haven't quite wrapped our minds around. So, Americans like to end their talks on an optimistic note. You're always expected to say something about hope.
Okay, everyone, we're going to try to get Masha back. So just hang on.
Well, the joys of COVID, the disappearing panelist, my computer crashed, my apologies. I was in the last minute of my presentation. And what I was saying is that Americans like to end their talks on an optimistic note. You're always supposed to say something about how we will prevail, and that is why your work is so necessary. I don't know if we will prevail. I actually don't want to use any knee-jerk words about hope. I have hope. I don't know that I have a lot of optimism, but I think hope is a moral imperative, and hope is only real if you're actually doing something to change things, to bring the hoped for future closer. I'm not making assumptions about progress being linear, but I know that your work is more important than perhaps it has ever been in my lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Masha, and glad we got you back to hear the final words there, because if we had been left with just the idea that there was no hope, that would have been even more depressing. But thank you for reminding us that we are here, and the reason we're doing this work is really to try to change things. And in many of our cases, maybe I'm more hopeful than you. I think we will see change, but I have to say, I am pretty certain in some places, change will not happen in my lifetime. So that's why we're all here, to strategize together and to see what we can do to change the world, to secure human rights for LGBTIQ people everywhere. Thank you so much, Masha. We really love to have you.
Thank you for having me.
And now we